Okay, this essay question. So the Xavier applied essay is probably the one that worries me most about the entire paper. And the reason for that is that lots of you are answering the question that you want to see rather than the question that's actually written there. So the question actually says quite a lot. There is a huge stem about Xavier, the teacher, the old man, and there is so much scope to use that the whole way through your essay, and that is what AQA want you to do. Okay, what they don't want is you to just go, right, I'm going to outline plasticity and then just shove some studies on, then I'm going to outline functional recovery and shove those studies on, and then maybe tack something in about Xavier or comment, you know, just at the end. That's not how you do an applied essay, and you all know that. Because right back when we began learning psychology in year 12, we looked at a perfect essay for definitions of abnormality that showed how you had to interweave the AO2 through the essay. That didn't ever say at any point you just require three or four sentences. You know, I know that the AO1, AO2, AO3 split is 6-4-6. But I've said all along that 4-mark AO2 application isn't actually 4 marks at all. You need to think of it as being threaded through the entire essay. The examiners have spent so long creating this stem for you, and it's really long. It is, I don't know how many sentences, 6 or 7 sentences. It's extensive. You need to use every aspect of it. So one particular student, well actually there were lots of you, but one particular essay stood out to me, and I'm going to share that with you so you can use that as like a shining example of how to interlink the AO2 the whole way through. That's what we want here, okay? So that's what you're aiming for. AQA are moving more and more to this style of 16 marker. They don't want you to be able to rote learn essays and just reel them off like you will be able to in the forensics section. There are going to be a couple of those out of the 6, which you'll probably get in May, but the majority, I would say 3 or 4, are more likely to be STEM, or half are likely to be STEM. So when you get them, that's the most important bit. I'd rather you actually answered the question and did the AO2 before you even do AO1. Like, that is the absolute critical objective, is use the STEM. I cannot hammer this home enough. Okay, so what did I want? I wanted you to tell me about plasticity. I wanted you to tell me what it was, and lots of you are confusing the two. So plasticity is the brain's ability to develop, change, adapt in response to new experiences. Functional recovery is an example of when the brain is forced to adapt following a trauma. So it's a form of plasticity, but not all plasticity is trauma-based. Okay, we know that plasticity is strongest in children. At age 2 to 3, they have 15,000 synaptic connections, but synaptic pruning brings that down over time. You can tell me about that. Then link it back. So what does this mean? Well, Xavier says, you know, I'm young, da-da-da-da. Okay, yeah, so he's right. Youth is linked to plasticity, and youth is linked to functional recovery. But maybe actually sometimes if functional recovery isn't possible, you can't necessarily regain brain function. So tell me what the AO1 is about functional recovery. Tell me about the 3 ways that the brain can spontaneously repair itself. Has that happened in the STEM? No. Why? Because this man has clearly got Broca's aphasia, hasn't he? He's lost the ability to speak. Is there an equivalent homologous area on the right side of the brain that can take over speech function? Not that we know of. How do we know that? Sperry. So label Broca's aphasia that this guy has. You know that. You know the inability to speak is linked to that disorder. Bring in the STEM. So is the teacher right? That's what the question asks. Refer to the views of the teacher and Xavier in your answer. You should be referring to them the whole way through. Any piece of AO1 or AO3 you write about, bring it back to the question. So if you are going to tell me about Maguire and the taxi drivers, or the bilingual students or the medical students, what does this have to do with anything? Because actually you're telling me about studies that are not really directly related to the STEM, because the STEM is about trauma, but you can make them relatable, because it shows that the brain is plastic in adults. So although, you know, Xavier's saying, well, it's because of my youth, I'm young, therefore I'd be okay. And the teacher is saying, well, actually, no, you know, I know of a man who never regained. Well, maybe neither of them are right. Maybe it's more complicated, maybe it's more nuanced. And we know from those studies that adult brains are capable of plasticity, which suggests they are capable of recovery. And we know that functional recovery is possible in adults because we know that neurorehabilitation exists. And research shows that after that initial period of spontaneous brain recovery, we can engage in various types of rehabilitation in order to regain brain function. So things like physiotherapy, speech therapy, all sorts of therapies offered on the NHS, which could help a man like this chap in the STEM regain aspects of brain function. Clearly not speech, but there's other things like motor function that we can regain following stroke or trauma. You know this. So link it back to the STEM. The best way to do it is every time you mention some AO1 or AO3, a sentence that brings it back. This relates to Xavier, this relates to blah, 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 because, like, it's so easy to do that. It's not something you have to practice or revise. It's something that you can just do. So if you have not done well in this essay because you haven't done that, I really want you to make this your focus, because this is absolutely coming in May. 16 weeks time, paper 1, you will have one of these essays, and you have to be able to link the AO2 back. If you, as a student, keep showing that you can do that, instantly the examiner will want to put you in the top mark band, because barely anybody does. Everybody does what you guys have done this mock. So make it your priority that this is the feedback that you take on board the most and that you go and put into practice now. Write me a new essay on Xavier that links every aspect of the AO1 and the AO3 that you are writing back to the STEM. I will remark it for you, check you've done it, and you are all set. Because it's a skill that you can then put into practice in any part of the course. That is what I want for you from this. Lots of you missed opportunities to bring in other studies about trauma. For example, Phineas Gage is a really good one here. He suffered a serious brain trauma and he didn't regain particular abilities. He changed significantly. So the extent of that damage and that trauma couldn't be repaired. And so there is some support that the teacher could be right there, isn't there? That was a brain injury, an accident. And he never did recover. He changed personality significantly. So evidence that functional recovery isn't always completely possible. So you don't have to rote learn and then regurgitate stuff. What's your brain telling you? How do you answer this question? What can you bring in to this question? We also even did that research by Lashley and holistic theory in rats that showed that it was the extent of the damage, not the location of the damage, that was the problem. So you can bring that in. It depends how bad the accident is, how bad the trauma is, as to the extent to which the brain can repair itself. So yeah, the thing I'm bothered about is the AO2. So please try again, because so many of you would be capped at half marks. Honestly, either band 2 or bottom of band 3. I barely gave anybody more than 10 or 11 out of 16, and that shouldn't be happening because this is easy. And the only thing preventing you wasn't your lack of AO1 or AO3, it was the lack of engagement. And that is the easiest skill. AO2 is by far the easiest skill in this A level. So try again, please, and I will remark it, okay? So obviously you're going to have the opportunity to rewrite at least one question. For most of you, this is the target, okay? I hope that makes sense. If you don't understand, ask me. But I will put up that example essay and the mark scheme and try again.